As mentioned, I'm from Ontario at the AESO, and I'm here to talk to you about some of the challenges that we've been facing and what we're seeing in terms of large loads in Ontario. So for some context on the Ontario system, our all-time peak demand was 27 gigawatts back in 2006. That was pre-recession, so since then the demand has gone down a little bit, and we're now roughly 25 gigawatts, which is about double Alberta's system. Our 2024 demand was 147 terawatt hours. We're summer peaking, and we have quite a diverse fuel mix, as you can see from this supply mix. We have nuclear, gas, hydroelectric, all making up around a quarter, and then we have some wind, some solar. A lot of that is behind the meter, or not behind the meter, it's distributed generation, so it's on our distribution system. Around 2 gigawatts of that wind and solar is on the system, on the distribution system. And then what's unique about us when compared to the Alberta system operator is that we actually procure generation. So yesterday there was a question about how are we convincing people to build generation? Is the market driving that, or the high energy cost driving that? In Ontario, we actually put a call out for generators to solve that problem. And the way that we do that is through our annual planning outlook. So the annual planning outlook is a 25-year outlook. It forecasts electricity demand, assesses reliability of our system, and then identifies capacity, energy, transmission, and operability needs. It takes those needs and translates them into targets, and then outlines the mechanisms to meet those needs and provides the sector with insights to guide investment decisions. So this is things like listing out our capacity auction targets, our targets for our medium and long-term procurements. So this year's planning outlook, we saw electricity demand forecast to increase 75% from current levels to 2050, which is 15% higher than we had forecasted the year before. A huge portion of this was because of industrial sector growth and data center growth that we're seeing, but we also did have a little bit of commercial sector growth, increasing population, and electrification also contributing to this. And this graph just shows you the blue line is our most recent forecast. The yellow line, which might be a bit hard to see, was the year before that. So quite a big change. With that change, what we're seeing in both of our outlooks is that our system is becoming dual peaking around 2030, and our winter peak is growing faster than our summer peak. And a large portion of that is because of electric vehicle growth, but also heat pumps and loads like data centers, which are flat throughout the year. And this graph just shows again that dual peaking system. Even last year and this year, the peaks are pretty similar between seasons, and then they just continue to be similar throughout the rest of our forecast. So it's not that we become winter peaking, we just stay pretty similar. So I mentioned already some of the factors increasing our demand, but the ones we saw were data centers, as mentioned, commercial sector building electrification was another one. Electrical vehicle production. So in Ontario, EV production, there's quite a few factories and battery manufacturers that have expressed interest and come up in the last couple of years. And then we've also seen some industrial sector economic development and decarbonization. So we have some new arc furnaces in the province that are in the process of being connected. But all of those things that I outlined have huge amounts of uncertainty around whether or not the projects are going to materialize, the levels of demand that they're going to materialize at, and also when they're going to materialize. So if we look and drill down into the commercial sector, which is where our data centers are captured, you can see comparing last year's forecast, which again is the yellow, to the dark blue, just how big of a bump we've seen from data centers in our most recent forecast. We have 14 terawatt hours of data center energy and 1.6 gigawatt hours of data center demand included in the forecast. And one of the things that has made this more difficult for us is the large loads coming up. So these 4 years here are each of our past 4 forecasts. So you can see it's kind of exponential, the amount of large loads that have expressed interest every year when we're developing our forecasts. And the light bars here are the load that's expressed interest that we hear from all of our different sources, and the dark bars are what we've actually included in our forecast. So as you can see, we don't include everything that expresses interest to us. And there's a number of reasons for that. Sometimes this may just be someone who doesn't even own land, and they're like, oh, I want to build something over here. And when you talk to them about, how are they going to do that? Do they have any financing in place? Do they even know what their connection's going to be like? They don't have an answer. So we discount our projects depending on the likelihood of them materializing, and we get that information from a variety of different sources. But we also discount the demand differently based on the sector. So this huge jump between our 2024 forecast and our 2025 forecast was mostly data centers, which is the light green on this graph. And you can see out of all of the sectors, we're discounting data center development the most. And a lot of that is because, again, the projects are just not at the same stage of development as the other sectors are. And I think another interesting thing, and something to put all this data center growth into context, is Goldman Sachs released a report earlier this year saying that data center growth was expected to go from 60 gigawatts this year to 120 gigawatts in 2030. So a growth of 60 gigawatts, which sounds insane, that's global growth. Texas has had 70 gigawatts of interest in their grid. We've had 8.5 as of this year. Alberta's had 16 gigawatts. If you add those numbers, they're more than 60, and the 60 is the global number, right? So we have a lot of data centers coming to utilities expressing interest, but a fraction of those are going to materialize. And the real challenge that we are facing as utilities is knowing which data centers are going to connect and where they're going to connect. So some of the general forecast risks that we always face are our current and near-term state of economy, which has been a lot of fun over the past year with all of the tariff stuff, long-term demographic affordability and productivity trends, materialization of all of these different projects, decarbonization strategies, climate change on weather-sensitive load, policy changes, and also electrification technology. But when we look specifically at large loads and their risks, as was kind of mentioned, many data centers want to connect in the near term, but if upgrades are needed to accommodate those connections, the timeframes of those upgrades are a lot longer. So it sometimes takes 7 to 10 years for transmission, 5+ years for generation. And so if those data centers were not in our forecast, they can't really be connected. Some of the challenges, though, is that historically when we're doing connection assessments, resource assessments weren't part of that. We just look to see, is there enough transmission on the system to meet that need? So you either approve someone without having the resources, which can lead to brownouts, or now you have to develop a new schema to say, okay, we actually have to address supply every time we have a new connection coming to us. The project size, timing, and location matter. So even if we had an exact forecast of exactly how much data center load there was going to be, if it's in one area of the province versus another, that completely changes the picture on your transmission system. So huge things, even the timing, a lot of generators come in, or a lot of data centers say they want to connect in, let's say 2030, but they may actually consume 25% of their load that they've assigned you until 2035. And if the projects don't materialize, or if they materialize differently, this can cause stranded assets. And I think one of the big things about resiliency, and to kind of tie this back to the theme of the symposium, is all of this stuff can create an imbalance of supply and demand. And if you have that imbalance of supply and demand, you don't have reliability, which is what you need for resiliency as well, right? So all of this is just kind of adding to that uncertainty of how are we going to meet meet these loads, and really enable these critical infrastructure to connect to our system, but also make sure that we're still doing it in a way that doesn't take away generation and the ability to serve other loads, whether they be, hospitals during an extreme weather event, or whether they be electrification projects that can help us with climate change mitigation. And I'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much.
Today I'll be speaking on behalf of Enmax and some of the challenges that we're dealing with, both as a DFO, TFO, and we do have generation assets, and kind of give a facility owner perspective on some of the data center interconnection challenges that are also seen by the AESOs and RTOs. Is it up there? Okay. This similar slide was up here yesterday, but just in case anyone wasn't here, Enmax does have both Enmax Power, Enmax Energy, and then Versant Power. And we have transmission assets, distribution assets, so transmission facility owner, distribution facility owner, and then our competitive side, that's Enmax Energy. That's generation, as well as our retail side for electricity services, as well as natural gas. And being an urban utility that services Calgary as our city, typically we've dealt with smaller customers in the kilowatt to maybe some megawatt scale customers, mostly residential, kind of businesses, commercial, and also downtown network connections. But now we're obviously getting much larger requests in the megawatt to tens of megawatts, and then most recently to a few hundred megawatts, asking for transmission interconnection. So it's kind of shifting how we've seen requests coming in through with a customer requests. And one of the issues now is just the large volume of requests that we're dealing with, both kind of on our customer-facing side, because we've mainly dealt with kind of residential developments, but now we're getting large requests for data centers of different sizes and magnitudes. And the main issue that we could potentially see, and we're limited a little bit on because we are an urban utility, is the land space constraint. But customers are getting creative. There is some vacant lots or maybe undesirable lots around the city, as well as vacant buildings and even some shopping malls that are being explored for being repurposed for data center connections. And even though there might not be in the gigawatt scale, but they are in tens of megawatts. But being a DFO, TFO, and GFO, we do have kind of the skills and expertise to make this happen. There might have to be creative because this is new kind of to everyone in the industry for the type of connections and solutions that can come up for large load interconnections. Some of the customer connection intake kind of struggles and challenges that we're seeing is most market participants or developers, they want speed to market connections. And like it was mentioned earlier, they want it maybe in the 1 to 2 year mark, but obviously in the utility space, we move a little bit slower. There's regulated kind of hurdles that need to be overcome. And the other thing that we're facing with as a kind of challenge to overcome is because we do have limited space available, multiple participants are looking into the same locations, and some of them do have confidential agreements, requirements, and then managing multiple kind of streams of connection requests and not sharing each other's information. And then one of the questions that we're seeing and kind of the variable that we're being given is variable reliability needs, because some customers are okay with N-0 constraints as a temporary solution, but then some want N-1 and kind of further redundancy. And one of the terms that is being played around with is BYOG, bring your own generation. And they are debating to bring their own generation kind of behind the fence as a possible solution. And then another thing that is being asked and has been asked by a few of them is bridging power. So some data centers are looking into kind of intermediate load capacity that they can depend on, maybe 5 to 10 megawatts, kind of in that range, until a permanent solution is built to them through a transmission solution, or maybe more complex distribution asset solution that just takes longer to kind of get them to that space. There is quite a high turnover rate. There's a lot of them coming to us asking questions. They don't potentially have land rights or anything kind of in place, and just dealing with some of that volume. And then one of the biggest questions that we're being asked now is a little bit more open-ended than what we're used to. Instead of coming to utilities and asking, can we have 5, 10, 20 megawatts? They're asking, how much can we have? And that's a bit of a different mindset where we're not used to that, and maybe further analysis would be required because systems are designed with kind of redundancy in place as well as reliability in mind. But when asked something like this, it kind of makes you think in a different way to try and find a good answer and solution for them. A little bit of pre-screening that we do at earlier stages, just kind of getting an idea, because the city of Calgary is growing and land will at some point be annexed, and just making sure that the service territory between us and Fortis, our neighbors, just that portion is clarified. Then checking their connection timelines, if they want something within a few months or years, and kind of getting a reality check on that. If they have acquired land already, or they're looking at it, and their actual desire and confidence in getting connections started. And then the one thing that also recently came up was some voltage connection preferences. If like Enmax offers and has our system built on 13 and 25 kV distribution feeders, but some customers have their own systems in place and they need 34.5 or higher voltages on their transformers or assets. And basically that has to go to a transmission solution and go to our AESO. We do offer kind of preliminary distribution assessments as well as transmission assessments before they go further down the line to give the developers like a high-level estimate and some feasibility assessment. But at the same time, they have to understand there would be costs associated with a lot of these solutions, and then if it requires further system upgrades, how it would be funded and capitalized through their end or kind of through the AESO interconnection process. Some of the considerations that go into account, again, at the early distribution phase is going to be, is there any feeders available in the area that the customers are requesting? Is there capacity upstream in terms of transformers, and how much load does that take up? Does it take away from our ability to have any sort of redundancy or N-1, again, reliability, performance, and having that resiliency? Or if there's spare feeders or if there's space, Enmax is an urban utility, so a lot of our feeders come in underground, and if there's space inside the building for indoor switchgear, if there's no space, then that might not be a feasible solution that can supply a large load like that. And then again, like I mentioned, upstream transformers do come in different sizes in our system, from 30 to about 83 MVA right now. So if you connect a 50, or you want to connect a 50 MVA load of data center, does that limit based off the location, or having to use multiple ones? And then again, like I mentioned earlier, if there's bridging power or various feeders available, and that kind of adds a little bit more into the complexity and potentially impacting reliability of multiple sites, and having the ability to transfer loads during adverse weather events and stuff like that within our system, and adding potential stress points from an operational perspective. And then some of the other further challenges, spot loads. Basically, data centers are inherently spot loads, and that's a challenge from a distribution forecasting kind of preliminary mindset that we had in the past, as well as transmission side. Enmax does have load capacity and hosting capacity maps available online that we offer to our customers, but again, based on the numbers that are being requested, it's a completely different number, and further detailed analysis does have to happen regardless, but it's a good starting point. And distribution is typically a faster solution that can be offered to large load interconnections. However, it's limited based off the capacity that can be achieved through various feeders and different solutions. And based off our kind of customer service requirement and how things are dealt with immediately, it's first come, first serve to have fair treatment, but maintaining reliability by having large loads coming to us kind of can take away from a whole bunch of potential interconnections and residential growth and things like that, which has to be balanced and taken into consideration. And then, yeah, I mentioned it earlier, Enmax does offer preliminary assessments just to give an idea of the scope, possible solutions, but again, if it's a larger scale solution, then it might have to go to the AESO anyway. Sorry, I'll try to hurry up. And then some of the issues that we've faced with, challenges, should I say, on the transmission side. Enmax primarily is 138, 240 kV system with a little bit of 69 kV sprinkled in the northwest. And some of the limitations based off the requested load that we have gotten so far might come down to our transmission lines, our conductors, and the voltage that we operate at, and the limitation that can have, like from a thermal perspective, just at the most fundamental level. And then same thing, like large spot loads, we do system assessments every 2 years, but we look at that as a system growth and natural forecast that we see for neighborhood developments, for customer interconnections, but not plopping in a large load at each one of our substations and seeing how the system performs. It's not a typical practice, but it might be a consideration we do in the future. And then based off the solutions that do come up and are feasible, we are limited a little bit in our space because a lot of our substations are surrounded by residential areas or just landlocked by businesses and other things where expansion of a substation is not feasible. But if a new substation is also being considered for building, again, there's less space and land available within the city to develop, or it might become a cost prohibitive solution for data centers. And the other thing that we assessed from very early preliminary studies is just large load interconnections. Like Nima mentioned before, they do cause issues potentially on the system. And some of the simple ones is just voltage support may be required for putting a large load at this voltage class, as well as any thermal violations, because there's already violations that exist kind of in longer term horizons, and this might speed things up and require system developments to be taken into account. And then the very large loads, as mentioned, may create system instability and require advanced studies taking things that are not typically considered when we're putting some more load onto the system, where we have to look at the frequency, the voltage, the rate of change of frequency, and things like that into account. And then the last slide here, some transmission interconnection, I guess, options is what it should say, but like I mentioned earlier, existing site expansion, adding a transformer, things like that, that may be possible, or building out dedicated transmission lines, but space is limited. There might not be space for a high voltage breaker, any other auxiliary equipment, potential transformers, current transformers, bus expansion, things like that. There may be radial solutions where we just build out our equipment to the customer, and then their own substation may be built, or some sort of switching station to provide their solution based off their reliability requirement and their comfort with risk. Or looking at multiple lines, and then not in our service territory, but in the province. Obviously, we do have 69 to 500 kV substations and equipment, and those could be considerations for large load interconnections. The higher the voltage, kind of the more flexible, but obviously there's costs associated with that. And then, like I mentioned earlier, some of them are considering their own generation, their own storage for backup, or even reducing their costs. And then within the city, the other thing is, like, we do have a lot of distribution assets, so there could be backups to transmission solutions via distribution solutions, like through feeders and kind of dedicated equipment on the lower voltage side. And I think that's all I had.
What I want to share with you today is about the data center load projects that we have in Alberta and some of the key lessons learned that we have learned from other jurisdictions that they have operational large scale data centers. Here's the outlines of today's discussion. First, we are going to briefly talk about the data center load growth. There are other, thank you. There are other colleagues already covered it, so I'm going to go through it very quickly, and then talk about the AESO's mandate and approaches to enabling the data centers in Alberta, and a little bit introduction about the data centers characteristics so that we can better understand the lessons from other jurisdictions and the new requirements that are needed and have been prepared by other jurisdictions and the entities, and what are the next steps that AESO is taking on this end. So as I think we heard enough, data center load projects are increasing globally, and Alberta is no exception. And currently we have over 16.5 gigawatt of data center load projects as of July 2025, and our Alberta system, historical system load is just 12.3 gigawatts. So comparing these two numbers, one can appreciate the scale and magnitude of the impact that the data centers could have in our grid. A little bit of background about the load and generation projects that we used to get in AESO. Prior to mid-2024, we used to get more firm generation projects than the load projects. And if we were to answer this question, whether we can, we have a sufficient supply to serve those loads, it was a very straightforward answer. And it was yes, we had enough supply to serve those additional load. But since mid-2024, with the increasing demand or increasing interest in connection of the data centers and the data center loads in particular in Alberta, the trend is the other way around. We have more load projects than the firm generation. And if you now want to answer the same question, whether we have a sufficient supply to serve additional 16.5 gigawatt of load from data center, the answer is no. We can't. In order for AESO to reliably connect these loads, AESO has prioritized reliability on top of everything. In order to basically tackle this challenge, AESO come up with two phases of measures. The longer term measure, phase 2, is to develop a sustainable framework with including and implementing the forthcoming NERC standards on the data center, which is expected to come as a result of NERC large load task force, which is AESO is part of it as well, and also is exploring different options from the tariff end. Whether we can have some sort of interruptible rate classes or some sort of terms for shedding the load, and etc. But for the shorter term, because many of these data centers, they want to construct very quick and they want to be energized very quick within the 2-3 years time frame, like in service date of 2027 or 2028. In order to do that, as an interim measure, AESO determined the limit of 1,200 megawatt data center load that can be accommodated with the existing framework. And this 1,200 megawatt capacity was distributed among all of the data center load projects that were in the advanced stage of the connection assessment process. Aside from this capacity allocation, there is also another concern about the performance of the data center and the impact that data center's operation can have in the system. Because of that, AESO is also currently developing some technical requirements for interconnection of the data centers. Before talking about the requirement for the data center interconnection, it is better to understand some high-level characteristics of the data centers. By many of the jurisdictions and the, entities, data centers are categorized as a non-conforming load, which have quite different behavior compared to our commercial or industrial load that we have. And this is because of the power electronics components that is in the data center and the sensitivity that they have shown to the voltage, as well as the steep ramp rates and intermittence load profile. Usually the data centers, they are connected to the grid through an interface of UPS, so that that UPS can basically provide different functionalities. One of them can be power conditioning and also providing immediate backup resource in the case of disturbance through the grid. This UPS is having this UPS and like large scale data center with this amount of UPS makes them really unique. One of the lessons learned from other jurisdictions that they already have hyperscale data center is right-through events. One of the events was in the past, in the last year, July 2024, in Dominion Energy. And what happened was that there was a permanent fault in one of the 230 kV line, and after 3 attempts of auto-reclosing, the fault got cleared. But during the disturbance, about 1.5 gigawatt of the data center load got disappeared from the grid, and Dominion Energy saw sudden loss of load. And after investigation, they noticed that the data centers basically they transfer off their load to their backup generation. As a result of this sudden loss of load, what happened was voltage rise in the local area that the data centers were located, and frequency spike in the bulk power system, which eventually got settled within 4 minutes. But now imagine that this Dominion Energy is basically located in Virginia. Basically, it is powering a big portion of the Virginia. So imagine that Virginia is one of the hottest spots for the data centers. And if we were to have all of the data center load projects that are going to be connected to the system eventually, if they were to behave the same manner that it happened in July 2024, we would have seen larger load drop, and it would have been a very severe stability risk and reliability risk. Here we see the blue line. I hope you can see it. Shows the 1,500 megawatt of load drop in Dominion Energy. And there were similar events and incidents in ERCOT, and also in Dominion Energy. That similar event happened again in February this year. The other event that is also important to consider when we are talking about the technical requirement is load-induced force oscillation. So basically, load-induced force oscillation is some sort of repetitive and cyclic pattern in the power consumptions of the data centers, and that could be because of some repetitive control action or some abrupt power consumptions from the data centers. And this force oscillation, if they are within the frequency of inter-area modes or torsional mode, they could cause mechanical fatigue or amplifying some of the modes in the system, which eventually can, if they last enough, they can cause stability risks. the two key takeaway from this event is that first we have to have sufficient visibility from the grid to identify this type of events. If we, for example, if we didn't have sufficient PMU in the system, we wouldn't be able to locate where these oscillations coming from. So that's that's one of the issue that we need to be mindful about. And the other is that we need to ensure that these force oscillations are limited and they are not causing any stability risk to the system. As I mentioned, as one of the load characteristics of the data center is large load ramps. And I'm not sure how clear it is, this picture, but basically what I'm trying to show here in a real AI training data center, this is the load profile for that particular data center, and we can see within the fraction of the second, the data center ramp up and ramp down more than 50% of its capacity. And now imagine that we have a hyperscale with, we are talking about 500 megawatt, 1,000 megawatt. And if we were to have such a step change in the load, what could happen for the balancing of the system as well as the stability of the system? Because this type of ramping is like a step change in the system. Because of all of these incidents and many other incidents that I was not able to cover because of the lack of sufficient time, many entities and organizations have come up with some requirements or are preparing some requirements. One of them is NERC Large Load Task Force, which they are targeting to publish some recommendation for standards by Q1, Q2 of 2026. But because the connection of these data centers is so fast and they want to connect like 27, 28, many regional entities have already taken action, and they, based on their system need, they already come up with some sort of requirement. For example, SPP, ERCOT, or Fingrid have already come up with some technical requirements for the large load, mainly addressing the challenges that they anticipate with the data centers. With all of these lessons learned and also with the high interest of data center connection to Alberta, and because AESO is Alberta is very weakly connected to WEC system with a very small basically system compared to many other systems in the North America, is developing its own data center interconnection technical requirement, while because we want to also help the data centers to connect to the grid as based on their timeline, we are also helping them to progress to the later stage of the studies with having some placeholder in their functional specifications for these technical requirements, so that once they are ready, we can fill out those placeholders. Here is the snapshot that shows the typical connection process for large load. I don't have time to speak about it, but if you have any question later on, we can discuss it. That's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, I don't think you can go a week these days without hearing of a reference to a new data center or machine learning or AI, generative AI. So it's certainly a very topical topic that we're discussing today, and it gives me a great pleasure that we've got pretty very capable subject matter experts from ISOs, from utilities, as well as folks who design and build those facilities. So the session today, of course, is powering critical infrastructure, data centers, and large loads in grid. So I'm trying, as I orient myself on how to navigate the slide deck here. So I'm going to paint a bit of a picture on, this very interesting time and place that we're living in, where the physical worlds and the digital worlds are converging in an unparalleled parallel space. You really, behind every AI, there is a data center, who are really the building blocks of our future economy, how we're going to live, how we're going to conduct our social interactions. I think the power of AI, most of you who are in the industry are either experiencing it through the various apps that we're using, or as in our company, we're implementing many new use cases of using AI. I've got a couple of slides that just walk you through where Canada fits into that. There we go. So I'm going to give you a snapshot of where, across the globe, Canada actually ranks as the 5th most number of data centers. 336 is kind of the number of data centers that are operating in Canada. As you can see, for a country with 40 million population, we're ranked number 5, which is quite large, but it's certainly because of the proximity that we have to a large population base in the U.S. Also, the large land mass that we occupy, our abundant natural resources, access to energy, reliable transmission grid, as well as relatively cheap cost of electricity, is what's driving, making Canada as an attractive place for data centers. If you were to zoom in the Canadian context, you will find that by province, you would, as you would expect, Ontario has the highest concentration, Ontario and Quebec, but there's a significant portion in Alberta and BC as well. The largest operating data center currently is 50 megawatts, which is in BC. The largest data center under construction is 90 megawatts, just north of Calgary. The largest planned data center, which is to be grid connected, is 2 gigawatts in the Edmonton area. And then the largest planned for self-power generation is 7.5 gigawatt in the Grand Prairie area. So certainly, over the last year or so, Alberta has become a bit of a mecca in terms of the future development of data centers. Now, data center load is quite unique. It's unlike anything that we have seen on the grid, to be honest. Not just the sheer scale and size of it, but the kind of power that it requires, the kind of utility infrastructure that it requires. I mean, if you think of what a data center is, it's basically on a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the technologies that we have built over time. It's adding intelligence to the existing assets that we have in our cities, in our industry. It requires a robust telecommunication network. It requires robust cooling. It requires a source of power, not just any power, but very highly reliable power. And of course, when you're a large consumer of power, you want that power to be affordable. The data center developers are also looking for opportunities for locations, for regions and locations where they can scale up. They can get the 100, 200, 400, 500 megawatts today, but they want to be able to scale up. They also typically don't participate in like energy management programs because their load is such that they do require that power. They do want that steady power so they can run their models. There are other data center loads such as crypto that are more forgiving, but the AI load, the generative ML type models, they do require a steady computational power and a steady flow of electricity. Now, those loads can fluctuate. They can fluctuate through the day. So those fluctuations can be significant. Because those loads are very large, the fluctuations obviously have a large impact on the stability of the grid. As a consequence, to deal with that fluctuation, the developers are working on opportunities to become more to devise chips that are more energy efficient. In fact, chips that have built-in storage capacity so that they're able to better manage their power usage, as well as smooth out the flow, smooth out their operating load, as well as they're looking at on-site power and self-generation, so that they're able to more or less be isolated from the grid and not have that significant impact. There's also opportunities for storage and even supercapacitors to manage those fluctuations. Just lastly, while there's a bit of a gold rush going on in terms of building these data centers, which of course are, there's a race going on around the world in being able to come up with the best algorithm, being able to run these models most efficiently, because whoever can do that is going to dominate the industry. But there are some challenges that, starting from the constraints on the grid, most of the, low-hanging fruit in most of the grids has already been taken up from some of the data centers that have gone on. So that, having large-scale capacity has become scarce. The interconnection process can take quite long. You're looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 years. If you have a project that you want to connect to the grid, you're looking at 4 to 6 years before you can actually get capacity, interconnection wires to connect. Just the procurement timelines are quite large for some of the equipment and substations, et cetera. And as well as the ability to add new generation capacity, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to 10 years. For example, for instance, the go-to source of power has, gas generation has become the go-to source, and those are looking at 4+ years. Not to mention the engineering and construction resources that are becoming quite premium. So with that, I'm going to invite our panelists to kind of tackle a bit of that landscape that I just painted about how do we deal with these large loads that, as I mentioned, can be upwards of 7.5 gigawatt. That, I mean, just in Alberta alone, the projects that are being planned are that large. So how do you handle that kind of a load? How does grid manage that? How does an AESO operator, how does a utility, or people who are designing and building it, how do they view that? So with that, I'm going to invite our panelists. Really pleased to have Nima Safari from the AESO, the Alberta Electric System Operator, Shivani Nathoo with the Ontario Independent Electric System Operator, Anton Matveyuk from Enmax, and then Payman Pournabi from HDR. So I'm going to, the way our panel is structured, we've got about 10-minute presentations each, and then we're going to have a Q&A towards the end. So To get us started, I'm going to ask Nima Safari. I'll read his little bit of bio so you understand his perspective. Nima is a lead engineer with Alberta Electric System Operator. He holds a PhD in power systems. Nima has experience in power system operations, interconnection studies, planning, and analytics. He is currently a lead engineer in the customer access studies team at the AESO, where he's leading a team that does studies supporting the integration of load and generation projects into the Alberta electric system.
I'm Payman Pournabi, Power Delivery Team Lead with HDR, and thank you for being with us here in Calgary, and thanks to Symposium for providing this opportunity to have this dialogue with you. Today I want to talk about something that quietly but rapidly is changing the way we see our grid resiliency. I want to talk about the large-scale, super hyperscale data centers, how they are changing the grid resiliency, putting pressure on the grid, and also impacting our day-to-day life. And also, more important, I would like to have a discussion, open a dialogue about how, as designers, engineers, planners, regulatory, we can work together to be more prepared for these changes. This is not just a technical challenge, it's a strategic one. The grid was not built with this kind of and type of change in mind, and we are being asked to adapt in real time. Just a quick overview of the company. Company been around for more than a century. We are 14,000 strong in 200 offices and 2,000 professional out of these 14,000 employees. They are dedicated to power generation, substation, transmission lines, and distribution system. Most of them, they are electrical engineer, but I have privilege of working with structural engineers, mechanical engineer, helping with foundation of the transmission line, substation, and we provide the full service of EPCM with architects, transportation, and in the past 5 years, we found the ground rule is significantly changed. We are sitting at the table with some clients about the data centers, about crypto mining, and they are asking us to connect significant load to the grid. Sometimes they are talking about 400 megawatt connecting to a 138 kV power line, which used to be a very quiet power line, and we need to connect to the grid without breaking it, and it's not an easy task, and we have to do it very fast. Now, data centers. Now, the data centers these days, they are more than racks of servers sitting in a warehouse. They are running our society. They are dictating how we function our society. They are handling a lot of critical infrastructure. They are handling the air traffic. They are handling a lot of bank interaction, financial systems. They are handling a lot of emergency calls, and they are helping with a lot of things that are embedded in our day-to-day work. Now, these are a lot of time handled by data centers, and they are about 400 megawatt loads adding to the transmission line all at once. It is about whether data centers deserve the power. They have the power. Now, here as a team, as a people, they are dealing with the grid. We need to see how we can deal with this change, not compromising reliability of other loads. And it's coming with our day-to-day lifestyle change. Sometimes we don't see the back end of our habits, but these numbers, they are put together about 2 years ago. Every minute, 6 million emails are sent. More than 700,000 Google search are made. 17,000 Teams or Zoom call are started. These are numbers from about 2 years ago when we didn't have the AI and ChatGPT. And the other is asking what is the biggest splash park in Calgary. From ChatGPT, that consumed 30 times more power if she used Google or the way I used Yahoo.com about 30 years ago to find that question. These are part of the ChatGPT in a part of your phone. It helped me this year to have happier wife when she wrote the note I put on an anniversary card. She was very happy. She felt super romantic compared to previous years. So this is something we are all adapted to. And how we rely on these kind of data centers. Let me bring this closer to home with a real-time example. 2021, one cloud-based data center in France caught fire. Within hours, about 3.5 million websites, they were down. At the time, that included COVID testing system, that included some banking platform, that included some emergency management, and also some of the government infrastructures were impacted. Now imagine the public trust impact on top of the financial loss. This wasn't a national emergency. This was not a cybersecurity attack. Simply, it was a simple fire in a failure point in one cloud. Now, this is the new reality. These facilities are deeply embedded into our critical infrastructure fabric. Any challenge, any failure ripples outward so fast. Building on what our panelists explained before me and what I described, I want to share what I see as someone who's involved with building data centers. We heard about the numbers, the gigawatt power forecasted. I'm working with my team, one of the teams that we have involved with building substation for data center in US. From my limited interaction with the team in 2025, so far we issue for construction packages for substation, more than 20 substations. These substations, they have about 200 megawatt power to 400 megawatt power. None of them are only single substation. They are either the first phase or client build the first phase and this is the second phase. So they start usually with 400 megawatt and they are visioning simply up to 1 gigawatt power. The ongoing projects that we are dealing with is gonna increase these numbers to more than 30 substations with the team only I'm working with to be built in different states in the United States. Each of them has a picture about half a gigawatt load, 30 of them, one player in the field, and I'm pretty sure my peers here or out working with EPCM, they are dealing with all of those huge changes. So what we can do with these kind of changes that we are facing with, these are approved projects. They are ready to be interconnected to the grid, and we are building them so fast. Substation, when I was involved about 15 years ago or even 5 years ago, the time of planning and delivery was 24 months to 36 months. We've been asked to deliver these substations in 12 to 18 months. So we prepared all the long lead equipment list. We prepared ordering them beforehand. We standardized design. We did all these things. And how we deliver these IFC packages, it's like gold mining times, and everybody's trying to get to the data as soon as possible. 2005, here in Calgary, every company wanted to add about 50,000 barrels a day, but those kind of like development, they took so long. But now, 12 months for one new substation is significant. And what we can do to connect to the grid without breaking the grid, we need to have better coordination with the operation system. We need to have better communication because the large loads do not just consume, they reshape everything. Like the local capacity is consumed. The protection and control is more complicated. Voltage profile, they are shifted. And interconnection timeline, they are exploded. So we have to have a smart protection schematic. We need to have planning ahead of time. We have visibility most of the time when we work with our clients that they are gonna do second phase, third phase. So we can work with them, and usually we work with them to work with utility, with the other planners to as soon as possible communicate these interconnection and demand so we can provide further information. We need to have some islanding. We have to take the distribution energy resources more seriously. Talking to some of our colleagues in Australia office, they are way advanced compared to what we do in North America. Hopefully we can learn from them and we can bring it to this market also. The bottom line, barring from what we discussed around the table around lunchtime, we had regulatory, we had operation team. From a builder, I'm adding a piece to a machine which is running right now. So from my perspective, I need to know the machine and I need to know how this equipment or piece I'm adding to the running machine can impact the functionality of machine. Also, I have to provide visibility, clear communication to the machine owner and operator so they know the impact of this added piece to their machine so they can make sure they can run this machine more reliable and effective. So as engineers, as operator, as planners, we are being asked to do more than ever, faster, with higher stake and tighter margins. The grid is under pressure. Data centers are just one part of this story, but they are one of the biggest ones, and they are not going to go away. As we heard about these expected loads, they're going to be around, and they're going to grow fast and fast. And these demands can be managed. As we talk together here, I'm glad we had opportunity to have operation, regulatory, we had builders, we have different stakeholders here, and also great knowledge shared by the professor and the students here. That brings a lot of value, new technology. Although these data centers, they're adding loads, but when I'm hearing about the online transmission line capacity that can be done by data center and potentially give us maybe 10-15% more capacity in the existing transmission lines, that's again another encouraging. So I'm glad we have this conversation. I try to cut it short here and allow more time for the question. Again, thanks again for being with us, and thanks again for the opportunity for conversation.
Thank you very much. That was really good, Payman. We've only got 5 minutes, so this is going to have to be super rapid fire. I've got a long list of questions, and I'm going to try to address them. The first one is for Nima. In Alberta, would we consider building capacity in advance of data center load, projected load?
In Alberta, it's not like what we have in Ontario. Yeah. So the generation, they come and connect at their own pace, and the load also comes. So what we have to do is that because the loads based on our tariff is a firm load and cannot be interruptible, so that we just need to ensure that we have sufficient transmission and supply capacity to accommodate them, and that's actually what limited us from connecting all of the 16 gigawatt of load that they want to connect and limiting it to 1200. So with the current framework, no, we cannot procure basically generation.
No, good response. Thanks for being brief. This one is for Shivani. Data center operators don't like to share their data. How can you model their behavior if they won't share data?
It's very difficult. I would say the biggest thing we've been trying to do is get as much information as we can from them, from transmitters. So sometimes, like in Ontario, the way the setup is that the transmitter, Hydro One, will hear about the project before we at the AESO may. So asking them for information, they may not be able to share specifics, but even, just knowing that there's 100 megawatt generators or data center somewhere is helpful. And then also collaborating with folks from other regions is really important to learn like how they operate specifically in terms of load shapes and that kind of stuff.
Perfect. Next one for Anton. Are the large load data center connection, if it requires system upgrades, is that handled the same way as normal load connection would be? So the cost of system upgrades for data centers.
Sorry, say that again?
The ratepayer cost impact of system upgrades related to data centers, is that handled the same way as normal load? The short answer is yes. I'll save you the hassle, but
Yeah, I would say that's more in the
Yeah.
ISO jurisdiction, but yes.
Yeah. The next question is, this is both for you guys, would you see any merit in considering prioritizing data centers who will agree to have their load managed, like would be open to energy management, ancillary services, as opposed to not?
Yeah, so definitely, I think the answer is yes, and that's, I think, one of the longer term in the phase 2 that ISO is exploring as a tariff redesign opportunity, whether there would be some sort of terms to shed the load or have some demand response, but that's not something that we have it at the moment.
If I can just add, I think in the short term, yes. In the long term, and I was talking to some folks earlier about the fact that in the long term, when you have electric vehicles and electric heating, your daily demand profile becomes pretty much flat. So them avoiding peaks is not really useful if there are no peaks. But I think in the short term, that's definitely helpful.
Really nice question for Payman. How confident in your 18-month delivery model that you talked about?
This didn't happen in 24 hours. It's result of about 5 years collaboration with our clients. So different clients, we play with major data center owners, and we standardize the design. We understand what they need, so dual feed. We standardize the size of the transformer even, the breakers, the topology, the bus configuration, number of the MV breakers. So when we deliver 18 months, we deliver 3 of them this year, so that are evidences. And we only spend 4 to 6 months for localizing the IFC package. And we already ordered those transformer, high voltage breaker, medium voltage breaker. So we exercise them several times, but it's a result of 5 years collaboration with our clients.
Yeah, just for clarity, that's just for engineering, not for the full build. That's still going to take 4 years. Last question that all we have time for is, this is for Anton and Shivani, should utilities consider restrictions on ramp rates as a requirement to connect for peak?
I think that kind of goes back to what the previous question we had, that yes, I think it's very important. Yeah. I don't know if there's more to say on that other than like, it's a new load, so we don't really know how it operates. But the more information we can have and the more flexible they are, the easier it is.
I know ISO has put some restrictions on that. Do you want to speak to that, or somewhat guidelines on ramp rates?
ISO right now is still exploring, and it's part of the technical requirement that we are drafting, so it's not something finalized to be able to share. But yeah, in general, definitely when we have less ramping from the data centers, definitely you would need less regulating reserve, and of course this is going to reduce the operation cost and also the challenges.
Perfect. Last question on transformer procurement timelines. You're looking at minimum 1.5 to 4 years, depending on the supplier and where in the world you order that from. Fantastic panel, great list of questions, wonderful presentations. I gotta say, this was quite an informative session. I do want to thank all the audience for being here. Folks are available. Hopefully, whatever is next, if you want to get hold of them or me, we're happy to chat further. Thanks again for your time.